professor, a psychiatrist who specialises in mental health challenges at James Cook University. Professor, unlucky, Australia just missed out on the top 10. It came 12th. And actually, that's not really a new story. That list by the World Happiness Report was published in March. The reason we wanted to speak to you today is that your country, Australia, has recently launched a wellbeing dashboard. Tell us about that.
Well, this is quite innovative, and I think that generally speaking, governments have been somewhat fixated on economic indices. We all know about gross domestic product, those kind of things. But this dashboard has actually some interesting and novel things in it. I mean, things we would expect like sustainability, like air quality, that kind of thing, climate resilience, emission reduction. We wouldn't be, too surprised about that. But there's also measures under the heading of cohesiveness, things like acceptance of diversity, representation, a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, of connectedness. And in fact, the dashboard has 50 measures that any citizen in Australia or around the world can look up, and you'll have a graph of how it's been over the last 5 years. So it's really quite an innovative and very broad, heuristic that we can all dial in and look at.
But would a normal citizen be expected to extrapolate from the facts that they're looking at on the dashboard and have to then decide what the next course of action will be? Do you think people will get help in analysing the data and then trying to interpret what they need to do to be happier?
Yeah, the data is lovely in that it's usually graphically represented in very simple line graphs or bar graphs, but I think it's going to be very much used by our decision makers. And I think that our decision makers hopefully will be focused on things a little bit broader than simple economic indices. So, for instance, if you're building new infrastructure, you might look how that increases economic productiveness, but you might also look if that actually causes a sense of belonging, if it actually links people and links communities. You can actually look at indices to help you make really important government decisions. So I think it will be used very broadly by government, very broadly by people who are interested in influencing government, so people who are lobbying or people who are part of, movements about maybe climate change or maybe native forests or maybe, inclusiveness and societal inclusiveness. I have a strong suspicion it will be broadly used.
I wonder what you consider to be the biggest obstacles to happiness, and considering that you concentrate on mental well-being, how much of happiness is within us and how much is affected by external factors?
Look, a fantastic question. And I think it's a very difficult one to answer because I think everyone's different. Some people are very driven about what's inside of them. And if they have a sense of well-being, they are resilient and they can face adversity and they get on with things. Some people need really external badges of courage. Some people need, to be validated by a degree or by a position or by a relationship or whatever. So unfortunately, it's a very difficult thing. I think the trick is knowing who you are, knowing, how you respond and how you believe and behave, and trying to optimize that. For instance, I probably am fairly resilient to external factors, but that's just me. So, difficult question.
You say that you beat yourself up a lot, I think. Okay, listen, finally, you're in Australia. How did it reach number 12 on the list? Any country would be happy to be in the top, 50, 60, 70 countries. What is it about Australia that makes people there so happy?
Sure. Look, I think that we are relatively wealthy. We have low population density. We still have a lot of very rich natural environment. We generally speaking are not stressed by weather extremes. I mean, often we call ourselves the lucky country. We still have many, many problems, and we have problems about inequity of wealth. We have problems about, our Indigenous people have still discrimination and Many of us are greatly hoping they'll have a voice to Parliament soon. We still have lots of problems, but generally, don't forget we're a long way away from places of conflict. We are sitting down here on the other side of the world, kind of quite happily, with our very well-off neighbour, New Zealand. So I think, there's just a lot of things about the country that make it somewhat easy to score well on these metrics.
Brett McDermott, it's always a great pleasure to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much indeed. Really appreciate it.